The party was already in full swing when I noticed Margaret, my mother-in-law, making her way through the crowd with a proud smile and 2 shiny white boxes in her hands. The sunlight from the big windows hit the glossy packaging, and I caught the unmistakable silver apple logo. Everyone seemed to pause as she stopped in front of Daniel's brother Peter's kids, Josh and Mia. "For my wonderful grandchildren," she announced, holding the boxes out like a game show prize. Josh's eyes went wide. "No way, a MacBook?" Mia squealed, hugging her grandmother hard before tearing into the wrapping. Lily, my daughter, stood a few feet away in her teal birthday dress, her hair done in loose curls just the way she liked. She had been smiling all day, helping hand out plates of cake, laughing with her friends. But when she saw those laptops, her eyes lit up in that hopeful way I knew too well. She stepped forward, her voice gentle but full of expectation. "Did you get me one too, Grandma?" Margaret didn't even hesitate. She leaned down slightly, speaking loudly enough for everyone at the table to hear. "Oh, sweetheart, no, I only buy these for my real grandchildren." The air in the room seemed to vanish. Someone's fork clinked against a plate. A few parents shifted uncomfortably. I froze, my mind trying to catch up with what I'd just heard. Lily's smile disappeared instantly, her face crumpling like paper. Daniel stiffened beside me, but before either of us could react, Lily's lower lip trembled. She turned and walked quickly toward the hallway, her hands balled into fists. I could feel my pulse pounding in my ears. Heat rushed up my neck. My eyes locked on Margaret's satisfied little smirk, and in that moment, one thing became very clear to me. This wasn't just about a laptop. This was about something much deeper. And if she wanted a war, she'd just found one. I found Lily in the bathroom, the lock clicking open only after I promised it was just me. Her teal dress, the one she'd been so excited to wear, was crumpled in her lap, and her cheeks were streaked with black from her mascara. She looked up at me, eyes swollen. "Is it because I'm adopted?" Her voice cracked on the word adopted, and it cut through me like glass. I knelt beside her, wrapping my arms around her small shoulders. "No, baby, you are mine. In every way that matters. None of this is your fault." She sniffled into my shoulder, but I could feel how rigid she was. "She made everyone hear it, Mom. She wanted them to know I'm not really hers." I pulled back to look her in the eye. "Lily, I don't care what Margaret thinks. You're our daughter, Daniel's and mine. That's the only truth that matters, and I promise you, I am going to fix this." She nodded slightly, but her gaze dropped back to her lap. I could tell the words had landed only halfway. The wound was too fresh. I stood to grab some tissues from the counter, but before I could speak again, voices drifted in from the hallway. The sound of Margaret's laugh, low and smug, carried through the door. Well, she needed to hear it, she was saying. "Better now than later. Consider it sending a message." I froze, my hands tightening around the tissue box. A man's voice replied, "Peter, her golden child," murmuring something I couldn't make out, followed by Margaret's sharp, knowing chuckle. My heart pounded, and not from sadness this time. This wasn't a slip of the tongue. She had planned it. She had meant every word. And if she thought I was going to let her get away with it, she didn't know me at all. Later that evening, after the last of the guests had left, and the community hall was quiet, I stayed behind to help clean up. Lily had gone home with Daniel to rest, her energy drained. I needed a few minutes away from everyone, especially Margaret. I gathered paper plates, stacked chairs, and tried to focus on the small clatter of cleanup, instead of the image burned into my mind, Lily's face collapsing when she heard those words. Margaret's coat was draped over the back of a chair in the corner. I picked it up to hang on the rack when something heavy slid from the pocket and hit the floor. A folded receipt. I shouldn't have cared, but the bold print caught my eye. TechZone Electronics. I unfolded it. 2 items, MacBook Pro 16-inch, $1,999 each. Subtotal, $3,998. Paid in cash. The date was 2 weeks ago. My stomach dropped. 2 weeks ago, Margaret had claimed she was late on her prescription refills because her fixed income couldn't cover the copay. She'd talked about cutting corners on groceries, letting us think she was barely scraping by, and all along she'd had $4,000 in cash to drop on luxury laptops. Just not for Lily. I stood there for a moment, the paper crinkling in my fist, trying to slow my breathing. This wasn't about money, it was about intent. She hadn't just forgotten Lily, she had excluded her, with planning and precision. My fingers shook as I slipped the receipt into my pocket. She might be smug now, but this was proof. She couldn't spin her way out of this one. When I looked up, I saw Margaret across the room, laughing with Peter and sipping coffee like the day had been a triumph. She had no idea I was holding the key to blowing her story apart. The car ride home felt like being trapped in a vacuum. No music, no small talk, just the hum of the tires on the road and the occasional click of the turn signal. Lily sat in the back, her forehead resting against the window, eyes fixed on the blur of passing streetlights. She hadn't said a word since we left the party. Her birthday crown still sat crooked on her head, but it felt more like a sad reminder than a celebration. Daniel's hands gripped the steering wheel so tight his knuckles were white. He kept glancing at the rearview mirror, but every time his eyes met Lily's reflection, he looked away quickly. I stared straight ahead, the folded receipt burning a hole in my pocket. I wanted to slam it down in front of him right there, but I needed the timing to be right. I needed him calm enough to hear me, and angry enough to act. Finally, I broke the silence. "We can't let her stay with us after this." My voice was low but steady. Daniel didn't answer immediately. He shifted his grip, cleared his throat. "Claire, she's my mother." I turned to look at him, my chest tightening. "And Lily is your daughter, the one she humiliated in front of everyone." He opened his mouth, then closed it, his jaw flexing. The tension in the car grew heavier, like we were both holding our breath. I leaned back against the seat, my decision already made. "You need to choose, Daniel, because this time you can't have it both ways." The streetlight ahead turned red, forcing us to stop. The car idled, the ticking of the blinker loud in the silence. He stared at the road like it could give him an answer. When the light turned green, he pressed the gas, but his silence told me more than any words could. The next morning, I found Margaret in the kitchen, humming to herself while stirring sugar into her coffee. She was wearing that silk robe Daniel had bought her last Christmas, the same one she'd claimed was too fancy to wear in front of guests. I stood in the doorway for a moment, my fingers tight around the counter's edge. "We need to talk." She didn't even look up. "If this is about last night, Claire, I don't have the energy for dramatics this early." I stepped closer. "This isn't drama. This is about you telling Lily she's not your real granddaughter." Finally, she met my eyes, her expression smooth and cold. "Well, she isn't. Not by blood. Why would I waste money on something so extravagant for a child who isn't truly family?" My jaw clenched. "Because she's your granddaughter in every way that matters. Because she's been in this family since she was 3 days old. Because she's Daniel's daughter. And mine." Margaret sipped her coffee slowly, as if savoring the moment. "That might be enough for you, not for me." My chest tightened, heat flooding my face. "You do realize what you're doing to her, how you're making her feel like she doesn't belong." Her lips curved into something between a smirk and a shrug. "I think she should know her place before she grows up expecting more than what's hers." Behind me, a floorboard creaked. I turned to see Daniel standing in the doorway, frozen. His eyes darted between us, the color draining from his face. "What did you just say to her?" he asked, his voice low but dangerous. Margaret's gaze flickered briefly, but she didn't answer. The silence stretched until Daniel stepped into the room, his eyes never leaving his mother. I held my breath. Whatever happened next, there would be no pretending this conversation didn't happen. Daniel stepped closer to the table, his voice measured but tense. "Mom, you can't just say things like that to Lily. She's 13. She understands every word you said." Margaret waved a hand, as if brushing away a fly. "I was only being honest. You know I don't believe in sugarcoating." I crossed my arms. "Honest? Let's talk about your version of honesty. Last Christmas, you gave Josh and Mia those top-of-the-line gaming systems, and Lily got a $5 notebook from the clearance bin. The year before that, you drove 2 hours to watch Josh's soccer final, but you felt too tired to come to Lily's art show 10 minutes away. And that's just the big things." Daniel's eyes flickered toward me. "Claire." I kept going, my voice rising. "She remembers every detail about their hobbies, their favorite foods, but somehow always forgets Lily's birthday wish list or her favorite colors. And last night, you made sure everyone in that room knew she wasn't your blood." Margaret crossed her arms, unfazed. "You're reading too much into it. Children bounce back." I looked at Daniel. "Does that sound like a grandmother who cares about our daughter?" He opened his mouth, then closed it again. His shoulders sagged, the lines around his eyes deepening. For the first time, I saw uncertainty, not the automatic defense I'd come to expect. Daniel turned to his mother. "You've been doing this for years, haven't you? Picking favorites, making excuses?" Margaret's lips pressed into a thin line. "I love my family. Just not in the way you want me to." Daniel stared at her for a long moment, then looked back at me. I could tell something had shifted. He was starting to see it, really see it. Over the next week, the house felt different, quieter, not peaceful, just heavy. Lily stopped coming downstairs in the mornings until the very last minute before school. At dinner, she pushed food around her plate, answering questions with shrugs or one-word replies. Her sketchbook stayed closed on her desk, the pencils untouched. One afternoon, the phone rang while I was folding laundry. It was Mrs. Lee, her art teacher. "Claire, I'm a little concerned," she began gently. "Lily hasn't turned in her last 2 assignments, and she usually submits early. She's been sitting in class staring at blank pages." I pressed the phone tighter to my ear. "That's not like her at all. That's why I wanted to check in," Mrs. Lee said. "She's talented, and she loves art. For her to withdraw like this means something's wrong." After the call, I went to Lily's room. She was lying on her bed, scrolling aimlessly through her phone. "Hey," I said, sitting on the edge of the mattress. "Want to talk?" She didn't look up. "There's nothing to talk about." I reached out to touch her arm, but she pulled it back gently. "It's fine, Mom. I'm fine." She wasn't. I could see it in her eyes, the way they'd lost that spark that used to light up when she talked about her drawings. I left her room with a knot in my stomach. This wasn't a phase. This wasn't something she'd bounce back from on her own. Margaret's words weren't just cruel. They were still echoing inside my daughter's head, chipping away at her confidence. And standing by, hoping it would fade, wasn't an option anymore. She had to go. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, listening to the faint hum of the fridge downstairs and the occasional creak of the house settling. Beside me, Daniel's breathing was steady, but my mind wouldn't stop replaying Lily's flat voice. "It's fine, Mom. I'm fine." Around midnight, I gave up trying. I slipped out of bed, padded down to the kitchen, and opened my laptop. I started searching. Toxic grandparents, favoritism in families, impact of emotional abuse on children. Article after article confirmed what my gut already knew. Long-term favoritism and rejection can cause deep emotional wounds, especially in adopted kids. The words low self-worth and lifelong trust issues jumped off the screen. I began jotting notes, patterns of behavior, examples of Margaret's favoritism, the MacBook incident, the receipt, the years of small humiliations. If I had to make a case to Daniel, or to Margaret herself, I wanted it clear and undeniable. The kitchen clock ticked past 3 a.m. when I heard soft footsteps behind me. Daniel appeared in the doorway, rubbing his eyes. "Claire? What are you doing?" I closed my notebook halfway. "I'm making a plan. She can't stay here. Not after what she's done to Lily." He leaned against the counter, watching me. His expression was tired, but different. Not defensive. "I've been thinking," he said slowly. "You're right, she crossed a line. And it's not the first time. It's just the worst time." Relief washed over me, mixed with something sharper. Determination. "So you'll back me?" Daniel nodded, his jaw tightening. "Yeah. We put Lily first. Always." For the first time in days, I felt the tiniest spark of hope. The next morning, I called my mom before the sun was fully up. She answered on the second ring, her voice warm but alert. "Claire, what's wrong?" I told her everything. From the MacBook betrayal to the words Margaret had thrown like knives in front of a room full of people. I didn't even try to keep my voice steady. Mom listened quietly, only interrupting to ask, "And how's Lily?" "She's not herself," I said. "It's like someone turned off her light." There was a pause. Then, in that no-nonsense tone I knew well, she said, "You know what you have to do." "I do," I admitted. I need to make sure I handle it right. No screaming. No giving her the satisfaction of thinking I've lost control." "Exactly," Mom agreed. "Be calm, be clear, and don't let her change the subject. This isn't about punishing her. It's about protecting Lily. She's your first priority." By the time I hung up, I felt steadier. The decision was made. Now it was just a matter of following through. When Margaret came downstairs later, she mentioned needing to pick up a few things at the grocery store. I watched her leave, her perfume lingering faintly in the hallway. As the front door shut, I turned to Daniel. When she comes back, it's done. He met my gaze, no hesitation this time. I'll be here. I looked around the kitchen, the space where we'd hosted family dinners, celebrated holidays, even shared laughs with her once upon a time. Those days felt like another lifetime now. Today, I would draw a line, and it wouldn't be crossed again. Margaret came back from the store just before lunch, her arms full of shopping bags. I helped her set them on the counter without saying much. She was in a talkative mood, chatting about the price of strawberries and a sale on detergent, completely unaware of what was coming. When the last bag was unpacked, I poured her a cup of coffee, 1 sugar, splash of cream, and set it in front of her at the table. "There's something we need to discuss," I said, my voice calm. She glanced up, curious. "About what?" "The birthday party," I replied. "What you said to Lily, and what you've been saying, in different ways, for years." Her smile faded slightly, replaced with mild annoyance. "Oh, Claire. Still on about that? I was just being truthful, she's not my blood." I took a slow breath. "That truth you keep talking about? It's cruelty, plain and simple. And it's hurting my daughter, which means it ends now." Margaret leaned back in her chair, folding her arms. "Or what? Or you pack your things. You have 24 hours to leave this house." For a moment, she just stared at me. Then she laughed softly, shaking her head. "Daniel won't allow this. This is his home, too. Daniel knows," I said, "and he agrees." She smirked like she didn't believe me. "We'll see about that." Margaret reached for her phone, scrolling quickly as if already preparing her defense. I didn't flinch. Minutes later, I heard the crunch of tires on the driveway. Daniel was home early. Daniel walked into the kitchen, still wearing his work jacket. He glanced at me, then at his mother, who sat with her phone in hand like she'd been rehearsing her lines. "Daniel," Margaret started, her voice taking on a wounded tone, "your wife thinks she can throw me out. After everything I've done for this family." He set his keys on the counter and leaned against it, his eyes fixed on her. "Mom, I just have one question. Did you tell Lily she isn't really family because she's adopted?" Margaret's chin lifted. "I only stated the truth. She's not my biological granddaughter." The air seemed to thicken. Daniel's jaw clenched and his voice dropped lower. "Do you understand what that does to a 13-year-old? You humiliated her in front of everyone she knows." "She needed to hear it sooner or later," Margaret replied with a shrug. "Better now than when she's older and starts expecting things that aren't hers to expect." I could see Daniel's hand tighten on the edge of the counter. "The truth is," he said evenly, "you can't stay here. Not if you think it's okay to treat my daughter like she's less than her cousins." Margaret's eyes widened, the shock breaking through her practiced calm. "You'd really throw your own mother out?" Daniel didn't blink. "I'd do whatever I have to do to protect my child." For a long moment, no one moved. Then Margaret leaned back in her chair, crossing her arms, but the smallest tremor in her lip betrayed her. She knew he meant it. Margaret wasted no time. The moment Daniel left the kitchen to check on Lily, she was on her phone again, her voice pitched just loud enough for me to hear. "Peter, you need to come over. Your brother's wife is trying to throw me out." "Yes, today." "She's overreacting about something," I said, completely twisting it. I stayed silent, rinsing coffee cups in the sink. There was no point in arguing now, she'd already shifted into her victim role. Within the hour, Peter's silver SUV pulled into the driveway. He stepped out with his wife, Emma, both looking tense. Peter came through the front door first, his expression already defensive. "Claire, what's going on? Mom says you're kicking her out over some misunderstanding." Margaret appeared behind him, sighing deeply like this was all such a burden. "Thank goodness you're here. Maybe you can talk some sense into them." I folded my arms. "It's not a misunderstanding, Peter. She told Lily, in front of everyone, that she's not a real grandchild because she's adopted, and it's not the first time she's treated her differently." Peter opened his mouth to respond, but Emma stepped forward. "Peter, before you say anything, I've seen her do this. To friends' kids even. She plays favorites and pretends it's harmless, but it isn't." Margaret's head snapped toward her. "Emma!" Emma didn't flinch. "You know it's true. I've kept quiet long enough." Peter looked between his wife and his mother, something shifting in his expression. His certainty wasn't as solid as when he walked in. "Do you want me to go into chapter 13, where the lies unravel and Peter offers her their guest room, but only temporarily?" Peter's brows knit together as he turned back to Margaret. "Mom, did you actually say that to Lily?" Margaret's lips pursed. "I might have phrased it poorly, but I never meant to hurt her." I leaned forward, my voice sharp. "You planned it." "I found the receipt for those MacBooks, bought 2 weeks before the party, paid in cash. You've been telling us you can't afford your medications, yet you had $4,000 for Josh and Mia and not a cent for Lily." Peter's head snapped toward her. "Wait, you told me you were barely getting by." Margaret straightened in her chair. "My finances are my business, and I'm allowed to spend my money how I see fit." Emma shook her head. "Not when you're living rent-free in their house and using that money to play favorites." For a moment, no one spoke. The silence was thick with the weight of all the unspoken years of this dynamic. Peter finally exhaled, rubbing the back of his neck. "Okay, here's what's going to happen. Mom, you can stay with us for a while, but it's temporary. You'll need to find your own place." Margaret looked stunned. "You'd take their side over mine?" "This isn't about sides," Peter said firmly. "It's about what's right. And what's been happening isn't right." Her jaw tightened, but she didn't argue further. The room felt like it had shifted. The balance of power was no longer in her favor. After Peter and Emma left with a promise to return the next morning to help Margaret pack, Daniel and I found Lily in her room. She was sitting cross-legged on the floor, earbuds in, sketchbook open but untouched. I knelt beside her, gently pulling out one earbud. "Hey, can we talk for a minute?" She looked up warily, like she was bracing for bad news. Daniel sat down on her other side. "Sweetheart," he began, "Grandma is going to be moving out. She'll be staying with Uncle Peter and Aunt Emma for a while." Lily blinked at us. "Because of me?" I shook my head firmly. "No, because of her choices. The things she's said and done aren't okay, and we won't let them keep hurting you." Her shoulders relaxed just a little. "So, I won't have to see her at breakfast every day, or have her ignore me when I show her something?" Daniel's voice was gentle but steady. "You won't have to live with that anymore. You're safe here." For a long moment, Lily didn't say anything. Then she set down her pencil and let out a small breath, almost a whisper. "I feel safer already." I reached for her hand, squeezing it. The tension in my chest eased for the first time since the party. This wasn't going to undo the damage overnight, but it was the first real step. The next morning, Margaret made sure everyone knew she was packing. Every drawer slammed, every suitcase zipper screeched. She muttered under her breath about being abandoned in old age, and after everything I've done, her voice loud enough to carry down the hall. Lily stayed in her room, sketching quietly, but I could tell she was listening. She'd glance at the door whenever Margaret's voice spiked, her pencil pausing mid-line. By the time Peter and Emma arrived to help load her things, the house felt tense and cluttered. Boxes and bags lined the hallway. Margaret strutted from room to room, pointing out which ones were fragile as though she were a guest being catered to, not someone being asked to leave for her own behavior. As Lily came downstairs for school, she stopped in the hallway where Margaret stood for a second. She just watched her grandmother fuss over a suitcase. Then, with quiet dignity, she said, "Goodbye, Grandma. I hope you'll be comfortable at Uncle Peter's." Margaret turned, her expression unreadable. "Goodbye, Lily." No warmth, no smile. Not even a trace of affection. Lily's gaze dropped, but she gave a small nod and walked out the door. I watched her from the window as she climbed onto the bus, her back straight, chin high. She wasn't letting Margaret see the hurt, and that made me proud. By late morning, most of Margaret's belongings were in Peter's SUV. The back seat and trunk were stuffed with suitcases, boxes, and a few awkwardly wrapped items she claimed were too valuable to trust to movers. Daniel stood by the driveway, hands in his pockets, watching the last box go in. Margaret emerged from the house with her purse, pausing at the front step as though waiting for someone to beg her to stay. Instead, Daniel stepped forward. "Mom," he said evenly, "before you go, I need you to understand something. You'll only be welcome back here if you change the way you treat Lily, and if you apologize to her, sincerely." Her eyes narrowed. "Don't hold your breath." Daniel didn't flinch. "Then don't expect to stay here again." Margaret gave a sharp little laugh, though it rang hollow. "We'll see." She turned on her heel and climbed into Peter's car. Peter avoided meeting my eyes as he started the engine. Emma gave me a small, supportive nod from the passenger seat. The SUV rolled down the driveway, and just like that, Margaret was gone. Daniel exhaled slowly beside me. "It feels different," he said. I nodded. Lighter. For the first time in months, the air around our home didn't feel like it was carrying someone else's storm. That evening, it was just the three of us at the dinner table. No passive-aggressive comments from across the plates. No tense silences after pointed remarks. Just the clink of cutlery and the smell of Daniel's roasted chicken filling the room. For a while, we ate quietly. Then Lily started telling us about something funny that had happened in science class. How her teacher accidentally sprayed the entire front row while demonstrating a beaker experiment. Her eyes lit up as she talked, her hands moving animatedly. Daniel laughed, shaking his head. "Sounds like I missed quite the show." I realized then how long it had been since we'd heard Lily tell a story without hesitation, without glancing at Margaret to see if she was being judged. Halfway through dinner, Lily glanced at me with a small, shy smile. I want to paint again. I've got an idea for something new." I put down my fork. "I'd love to see whatever you come up with." The mood felt light for the first time in weeks. Even the sound of rain starting against the windows felt comforting, like the house itself was settling into the change. When we finished, Lily cleared her plate without being asked and disappeared into her room. I could already hear the faint scratch of pencil on paper. Daniel caught my eye across the table. "We did the right thing." I nodded. We absolutely did. On Saturday morning, I told Lily to grab her jacket. "Where are we going?" she asked, still clutching her sketchbook. "You'll see," I said. We drove across town to the art supply store she loved but hadn't visited in months. Her eyes widened when we stepped inside. Rows of paints, brushes, and paper stretching out before us. "Pick whatever you want," I told her. She hesitated, as if testing whether I really meant it, then started gathering supplies: a set of professional watercolor pencils, a fresh sketch pad, and a pack of fine brushes. I added a few extras when she wasn't looking. After we paid, we walked down the street to the little ice cream shop on the corner. She spooned fudge sauce over her vanilla and looked at me thoughtfully. "You know," she said, "I think I know my worth now." I paused mid-bite. "Oh, and what's that?" "It's not about what Grandma says, it's about who shows up for me. You and Dad do. That's worth more than any laptop." My throat tightened, but I smiled. "Exactly, sweetheart." We drove home with her bag of art supplies in the back seat, and she held the sketchpad in her lap the whole way. When we got inside, she headed straight to her desk. I watched her settle in, pencil in hand, and for the first time since the party, I knew the healing had begun. The next weekend, Daniel and I decided it was time to give Lily's room a fresh start. We cleared out the old shelves, moved her desk to face the window, and repainted the walls a cool teal she had picked herself. She helped tape the edges and roll on the paint, her hair pulled back in a messy bun, a smear of teal across her cheek. "It feels like mine again," she said, spinning slowly in the middle of the room. We strung fairy lights along the wall above her bed and set up a corkboard where she could pin her favorite sketches. The room looked brighter, lighter, like it belonged to someone ready to dream again. That evening, as we admired our work, my phone buzzed. It was a text from Peter. "You were right. Mom is difficult. She's been criticizing Emma's cooking, the kids' manners, even the neighbors. It's causing tension here, too." I stared at the screen, feeling a mix of vindication and relief. Margaret's behavior wasn't just aimed at us, it was part of who she was. Daniel read over my shoulder and let out a low whistle. "Guess the honeymoon period's over," he said. "Maybe they'll understand now." I slipped my phone back into my pocket. The important thing was that Margaret's storm was no longer in our house. Lily was safe here, and her world was starting to feel whole again. A week later, Peter and Emma brought Josh and Mia over for a Saturday afternoon visit. Without Margaret in tow, the atmosphere was completely different, lighter, easier. The kids kicked off their shoes and wandered into the living room where Lily was sketching at the coffee table. "What are you drawing?" Mia asked, peering over her shoulder. Lily hesitated, clearly unused to their interest, then tilted the page toward them. It was a detailed pencil sketch of a lighthouse, waves crashing against the rocks below. "Whoa," Josh said, leaning closer. "That's really good." "Thanks," Lily said, and I caught the faintest smile tug at her mouth. The three of them ended up sitting cross-legged on the rug, flipping through her sketchbook. Mia pointed to a watercolor of a fox. "Can you teach me how to do that fur texture?" Lily nodded, pulling out an extra pencil. Daniel and I watched from the kitchen doorway, exchanging a glance. Without Margaret's shadow, the cousins were seeing Lily for who she was, not who they'd been told to see. Before they left, Lily invited them to her upcoming art show at school. "You should come," she said shyly. "It's next month." "We'll be there," Mia promised. And judging by Peter and Emma's nods, they meant it. 2 weeks later, Lily's art teacher called with news that made her squeal so loud I almost dropped my coffee. Her watercolor of the lighthouse had been chosen for a citywide student exhibition. "Only a handful of students get in each year," Mrs. Lee told me. "It's a big honor." The night of the show, we drove to the downtown gallery. Lily in a simple navy dress with her hair in a braid over one shoulder. The place was bustling. Students, parents, teachers, and art lovers wandering between displays. We found her piece hanging near the center, framed and lit perfectly. The small placard read, "Lily Thompson, age 13. She stood in front of it, cheeks flushed with pride, as people stopped to admire it. "It's beautiful," a woman said to her. "You have real talent." Lily beamed. I scanned the crowd, half expecting Margaret to appear despite everything. But she didn't. Instead, Peter, Emma, Josh, and Mia walked in. The kids made a beeline for Lily. "This is amazing," Mia said, pulling her phone out to take a picture. Josh grinned. "You're gonna be famous." Watching them together, laughing, pointing at other pieces, felt like a glimpse into a better future. One where Lily's worth wasn't measured by Margaret's approval, but by the people who chose to show up. And tonight, they had. After the exhibition, we all went for pizza at a small place down the street. The kids grabbed a booth of their own, leaving the four of us at a nearby table. As soon as we sat down, Emma leaned in. "I've been talking to your mom," she said to Daniel, "about what happened with Lily, about everything, really." Daniel raised his eyebrows. "And how's that going?" Emma shrugged. "She doesn't take it well, but I've been firm. I told her that if she wanted to be part of our kids' lives, she had to stop making them feel like they're in competition. I even brought up the MacBook incident." Peter nodded, sipping his drink. "I've started calling her out too. She's not happy about it, but she's not fighting as hard as before. Maybe she's starting to realize it's not just you two who think she crossed a line." I wanted to believe that, but I'd lived with Margaret long enough to know she didn't change easily. "If she is softening," I said, "it has to be for the right reasons, not just to get back in our good graces." Emma agreed. "Of course, but I figured you should know she's hearing it from more than one direction now." I nodded slowly, filing that away. Hope was a dangerous thing, but maybe, just maybe, it was possible. It was a quiet Sunday afternoon when Daniel's phone buzzed. He glanced at the screen, then at me. "It's Mom." I watched his face as he answered, his tone cautious. "Hey." "Yeah, uh-huh." He stepped into the hallway, but I could still hear the muffled edge in his voice. After a few minutes, he came back into the living room. "She says she wants to come by. To apologize." I sat back on the couch, unsure how to respond. "Apologize to you or to Lily?" She says to Lily. "And to us." His expression made it clear he wasn't entirely convinced. "She wants to do it in person." I called Lily out from her room and explained. She listened quietly, her hands fidgeting with the hem of her shirt. "I don't know if I want to see her," she said finally. "That's okay," I told her. "It's your choice. If you want to hear her out, we'll be right there with you. If you don't, that's fine too." She looked down at her feet. "If she's really sorry, I'll know. And if she's not, I don't want to pretend." I pulled her into a hug. "Fair enough." Daniel nodded in agreement. "We'll let her come. But it happens on our terms." Margaret had agreed to come the next afternoon. Whether she came to make peace or just to smooth her image, that remained to be seen. Margaret arrived right on time the next day, a small tin of cookies in her hands. She stood stiffly in the doorway until Daniel invited her in. We all sat in the living room, the air thick with tension. She cleared her throat. "Lily, I came to say I'm sorry for what I said at your birthday party. It was wrong of me, and I can see that it hurt you." Her voice wavered, though I couldn't tell if it was from nerves or genuine regret. Lily sat beside me, her shoulders straight. "Why did you say it?" Margaret hesitated. I thought, "I was just being honest, But honesty without kindness isn't worth much. I realize that now. There was a pause. Lily studied her for a long moment. "I forgive you," she said finally. Margaret's shoulders sagged in relief. But then Lily added, "I don't forget though, and it doesn't make it okay." Margaret nodded slowly. "Fair enough." She set the tin of cookies on the coffee table. "I'd like to try again, if you'll let me." Lily gave a small shrug, not committing either way. I rested my hand over hers, proud of her quiet strength. Margaret stayed only a short while after that, making small talk before saying goodbye. As the door closed behind her, I realized something. Whether or not she truly changed, Lily now understood she had the right to set her own boundaries. Months passed, and life settled into a rhythm that felt peaceful. Margaret visited only occasionally, always with Daniel or me present, and the visits stayed short. There were no more cutting remarks, no obvious favoritism, but we kept our guard up. Boundaries had been set and they stayed in place. Lily threw herself back into her art. Her bedroom, with its teal walls and corkboard full of sketches, had become her sanctuary. She started entering local competitions again, and in the spring her painting of the lighthouse was awarded first place in the district art contest. The award ceremony was held in the school auditorium. When her name was called, Lily walked to the stage with her head high, her navy ribbon catching the light. Daniel and I stood in the crowd, clapping until our hands ached. Peter, Emma, Josh, and Mia were there too, cheering loudly. Margaret wasn't, and that was okay. After the ceremony, Lily posed for photos with her friends and cousins, her smile bright and unguarded. On the ride home, she leaned her head against the window and said softly, "Family isn't who shares your blood, it's who shares your heart, and never makes you question your place in it." I glanced at Daniel, and he smiled back at me. We had fought for her to feel that way, and no matter what the future brought, she knew she was exactly where she belonged.